Hello everyone, welcome back. This will be our final presentation of the year for Debbie's Dream Foundation. We have our meals for the stomach cancer patient. This is our winter edition, and we're very pleased to bring our menu here to you today. I have with me, of course, Ms. Mary Eve, our dietitian, and we'll be going over some questions. We'll be reviewing pretty much anything you're concerned about. Last time we did go ahead and do Thanksgiving type meals, and so this time we'll again be working a little forward, and we're going to be looking towards the holidays, towards Christmas. And so with that, we'll just go over the menu really quickly. We're going to have deviled eggs as our appetizer. We're going to have for our entree a spiced pork tenderloin, as well as some green beans with white wine vinegar and fresh mint. And that'll be accompanied by a sweet potato mash. For dessert, we have some cottage cheese with peaches and toasted walnuts. And we'll also have a digestive tea that could be either replaced with that dessert or accompanied that dessert. And so I suppose we'll go ahead and kick things off. But first, of course, how are you doing, Mary?
I'm good, Zach. How are you?
I'm really good. I'm really good. It's getting to be my favorite part of the year. The cold is my favorite, so I'm really excited. Yes. We'll be making some stuff that'll help warm you up too, so that's even better.
The 50s here today in Baltimore,
oh, yes.
So
50s and raining. Yes,
yeah.
A great day for a tea. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to start with the appetizer here. We have our deviled eggs, and I'm going to make these for you because they're very easy to make, very quick to make. So we're going to.
I was telling Zach that, you know, if you're in treatment or you're soon after surgery, a deviled egg can be a nice snack or meal because it's packed with protein.
Packed with protein.
Yep.
And we're going to be packing in even a little more fat to it with the mayonnaise, so that probably will help in terms of it being a single serving, so to speak. So we're just cutting these eggs in half, and we are going to dump the innards, the cooked yolk, right into the bowl here. We'll mix that up with everything else. As you see, you'll have a cute little cup, and that's what you'll be serving, the mixed egg yolk in. And that's sort of why they call it the deviled portion of that.
What's the key to a perfectly hard-boiled egg?
The key is, and it's very simple, 10 minutes in boiling water.
Okay, do you start cold and then go, or you put it in hot?
Great question. You actually are going to start boiling hot. So unlike potatoes, which you do want to start cold in the cold water, in this case, you actually are going to go ahead and wait for the water to get to a rolling boil. And at that point, you'll add the eggs. I would recommend using a caddy of some sort, so either a slotted spoon, something like that, to gently let them in to the water. If you plop them in too quickly, you might run into the issue of the shock will crack the egg, and then it just doesn't look nice.
Yeah.
So we're just going to finish cutting these here, and then we'll be mixing this with mayonnaise as well as a little mustard, some turmeric to give it some flavor, but also bring back that nice yellow color. What you'll notice sometimes when you're mixing different ingredients, you might start with a beautiful white or a beautiful yellow color, but things as they mix, you might get more of an orange or a brown, and you can remedy that a little bit. You can change things up. For me, turmeric is, in a lot of recipes, a great way to bring out an orange or a yellow if you really want it to pop. So, and the flavor is present. It's, you know, it's got an earthy flavor to it, but it's pretty mild overall.
It is, yeah.
So you can put it in just about anything.
So I have a question about what are the benefits of adding turmeric. So Zach was just saying about color.
So color is one of my favorites. It's got that phytochemical element, but also anti-inflammatory properties. I don't know if you wanted to speak on that for a minute.
Yeah, so it's a high antioxidant. It's a root and full of antioxidants. The only thing you have to think about is if you're a person who is in treatment with chemotherapy, turmeric is not something that you want to do in large amounts because of the antioxidant properties. It can actually make your therapy less effective.
Really? Okay.
So
that's great to know.
You're not going to want to take it in a supplement form. You could use a little bit in cooking, but you don't want abundancy of it. But if you're a patient who, or a person who is out of treatment and not having to worry about that, then yes, I highly recommend it. I buy it actually at my farmer's market in its root form. And I pop it in the freezer, and then I can take it out and grate it into different things.
No, I like that. Now, for me personally, I almost always opt for powdered turmeric simply because, well, it stains everything it touches, kind of like beetroot. So just for ease of use, especially in a demonstration like this, I'll be using the powdered. But there is something to be said for using an ingredient in its freshest, newest form because it's going to have more of the essential vitamins, nutrients that you're looking for. This will have some of it, definitely some of it, but only a percentage essentially.
Yeah, I do fresh ginger too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Love me some fresh ginger. So yeah, we have just a couple ingredients I'm putting in here, the turmeric, mustard. Everything today I've streamlined in terms of total number of ingredients. Basically everything is going to be pretty simple. If you wanted to add a little bit or subtract a little bit based on, like Mary Eve mentioned, certain ingredients not working with your diet, that's perfectly fine. And also, like we mentioned the other time, everything here is going to be fully cooked. We don't have any issues in terms of immunological issues in terms of the raw egg. Everything is well cooked, so we're good there. So we have the turmeric I added. The mustard is one of the main flavors, as well as a little white wine vinegar. And just a little bit, because you're going to want to keep that essential paste of the egg yolk, but gives it a great zing. A little parsley. And a little bit of garlic. And of course, like we mentioned, this is garlic powder. Again, just for ease of use and demonstration, but definitely if you can find fresh garlic. I think grocers have beaten a lot of people to the punch, and they already have pre-minced garlic, because like turmeric, it's a very tedious, very messy task if you're getting it fresh.
As potent though. Do you?
Yeah, no,
I do
that
use
is
it
one
for
thing.
ease, but it's not as potent as the. Yeah.
Very true. And the longer something's sitting on the shelf waiting for you, the less potent it'll be. So if you can find the fresh garlic, even still in its peel, that is the ideal way to go. If you are not looking for something so labor intensive, there's no shame in using the jar. It'll still have quite a deal more of the vitamins and nutrients than, for example, the powdered. Powders in general are going to have the least.
Yeah.
So if you're going for purely color or flavor, then you'll get most of what you're looking for. But if you're really looking for the essential nutrients, then always go fresh if possible. So.
There's also frozen. They have chopped garlic frozen in the freezer section. It's in an olive oil.
That's a great one to look out for.
The other thing too is that buying things that are already chopped up can sometimes help if you have some type of deficiency, if you've got neuropathy in your hands, or
right. And
you're limited in your
tedious preparations is, as much as they don't take too much effort, once you have some affectation with your hands or your joints, it can get kind of difficult. So never be ashamed to make what works for you. And at the end of the day, it's just about making something that's delicious and looks tasty. So we're just mixing. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
You could do a whole bunch of these and store them in the fridge.
Yes, absolutely.
And
These
pop
store
them
very
out.
well. Very well.
You want to use things up within 72 hours. So just keeping that in mind. If I,
And one thing about these too, just in terms of, we talk about this a lot in the kitchen, time and temperature control. Once you prepare them, make sure to get them in the fridge as quickly as possible. Like with anything, meat, poultry, dairy, or eggs, you don't want them to sit out at room temperature, because there will start to be bacterial growth. In the kitchen, we use a sort of a rule of thumb of 4 hours, but that's the absolute most you would want to do. And as you mentioned, we'll stick with 2, because better to be on the safer side. So that being said, yeah, just make sure once you prepare these, we'll be putting them right on the plate. But if you were to, like Mary said, make a few extra for yourself, then definitely store them immediately. So, all right. So the rest of this is actually pretty simple. There are a couple of options you can do. Now, this is the home chef way to do things. You take a little spoon, and you sort of scoop right above the crest, and you'll have a little bit of deviled egg there. There is another way to do it if you wanted to get a little fancier. If you have a gallon Ziploc bag, and you cut off a corner of it, or if you have a pastry bag that you might use for icing, you can fill that up with the egg cream and go ahead and pipe it in if you really want that like picture perfect kind of deviled egg. But it'll be just as delicious the way we're doing it, so we're gonna go ahead and finish out that way. So you see you have that nice yellow color from the turmeric. It kind of brings back from anything that might have been detracted.
And I told Zach, and he didn't know about this, but in Baltimore there's a crabby egg.
Oh yeah, I have to try this now.
My husband's niece makes for holidays, and it's crab meat, and then dusting it with some Old Bay.
And is seafood good for our patients?
Yeah. So shrimp can sometimes be a little bit difficult in the beginning of after surgery, but crab is so gentle and soft, it works.
That's good to know. So yeah, we've got these, and as you see, very simple, almost effortless, pretty much just mixing up the egg yolk and putting it back inside the egg white. And very familiar recipe to a lot of people. And when we talk about the holidays, I think a big part of the holidays is being together with family, recreating memory through food. And so to me, I love deviled eggs. It's one of sort of my nostalgic recipes. So last thing, we're just gonna hit it with a little paprika. And that's pretty much just for garnish. You can omit it if it doesn't agree with you, although paprika is not gonna have too much, really anything but color. It's mostly for garnish, if anything.
I use a lot of smoked paprika.
Yes, me too.
Yeah.
Adds a great level.
It's a great way to kind of give something a smoky, meaty flavor without adding a smoky meat. So with greens, it works really well. In chili, it works really well. Any Mexican dish. But if you're trying to do more plant-based kinds of things and you're missing that smoky, meaty flavor, try a smoked paprika.
That's a great recommendation. Yeah, I definitely agree. All right, so we have our deviled eggs started, and we're just going to keep on going. We have a pork tenderloin for our entree, but we're going to prepare the sides first to go along with it. So we have our sweet potato mash that we'll get going. And if you'll recall from, I believe it was either last performance or the performance before, we had a parsnip mash.
Yeah.
And so this will be cooked pretty much the same way. We're going to have the sweet potatoes, put them right in the cold pan, and we'll have some heavy cream to cook those in. And that really sort of cuts out the middleman and gets you right to what you're looking for in the dish. It's going to be very rich.
Sweet potatoes are a little bit more fibrous, so if you are a person who's having problems with early satiety or feeling full quickly, I would go to a paleo white potato with this. But I don't think people use Yukon Golds the way that we should. So Yukon Golds are kind of that buttery texture to them without having to add a lot of butter or fat.
Right.
So if you're thinking about it, try a Yukon Gold.
All right, that's a good recommendation. See, in my mind, I would figure for all of the sugar content of a traditional potato, you might run into trouble.
Not a problem. Not a problem.
Well, that's great to know.
So you're cooking them in the cream.
Exactly, cooking them right in the cream. We're cutting out the middleman.
Fascinating.
So yeah, no need to poach, no need to pre-sear. If you did want to gain a little flavor, you could cook them on the skillet or the pot you're using first and then add the cream and reduce. But of course, anytime you're running into singed elements, you have to worry, I believe, about carcinogens to some extent.
Yeah.
So just be aware of that factor.
It's more meat than, not vegetable, but it's meat.
I see, so it's the singe on meat specifically.
It is. It's the changing of the amino acids that's in the meat that can be a carcinogen.
All right, that's
but
very
this
helpful
is fascinating to me.
Yeah.
I learned something today.
I'm glad you did. I'm glad you did. So we've got
I always
this
learn from you, Zach. I always do.
I appreciate it. So we'll go ahead and move on to our other side. Today we have our green beans. I've already poached these off, and that's as simple as having some boiling water, blanching them for 30 seconds to a minute to both bring out the phytochemicals and soften up the texture so they're easier to digest. So they are already pre-poached and chilled. So we've gone ahead and boiled water and then shocked them in cold water so they stopped cooking. That's a big element too. If you keep them in the hot water and then just let them sit, they'll continue to cook. And so if they might be a little on the mushy side. Not necessarily the worst case scenario, but just be aware of that. Me personally, I wanted to keep a little texture to these. So that being said, we are going to do a recipe recommended to me by a colleague, a chef colleague that I work with on the side. And his recipe he recommends is Italian in origin. It's going to be green beans with very simple green beans with olive oil, a little white wine vinegar, and some chopped mint. And so those are the key two things. It's I've tried it yesterday for the first time, just trying out the menu, and it's incredible.
Awesome.
It's one of these things you just want to keep snacking on.
So,
did we have any questions?
Yeah, green beans are a bit hard for me to digest. What's another alternative vegetable to do with a meal like this?
So this particular recipe is probably the most specific recipe I have. The green bean and the mint just work in this really nice way. Besides that, I'm wondering maybe an asparagus might be an okay substitution.
So it's interesting you say that. So, and I know we should be eating, lightly cooked and vegetables, but with people with, stomach cancer, actually overly cooked is easier to digest. Mm-hmm. So if you're having a problem digesting green beans, I would overcook them to a degree so that they are softer. But the tips of the asparagus are very easy to digest. So.
Huh. Well, that's good, and that's the best part.
That's the best
to a lot of
part,
people,
right?
yeah.
So you're just going to cut the tip off, and you can totally just do. I'm thinking the same recipe with the tips of the asparagus.
Right, just the tips, and again, the olive oil is what we're adding, and a little bit of white wine vinegar.
Okay, so there's a question about vinegar.
Sure.
Is white wine vinegar better to use than apple cider vinegar? So.
Well,
It depends on what you're cooking.
Absolutely, and that would
Okay.
be my answer.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask: is there any irritation or adverse effect of one versus the other?
No.
Okay.
And there are so many different vinegars that are on the market. It's
Right.
it's a taste thing.
It comes down to the dish you're working with. One thing I can highly recommend, and this is something we'll be using today, is apple cider vinegar is my go-to choice for pork. Apples and pork are
together.
just a match made
Yep.
in heaven. So,
Yep.
for example, today we'll be using a little bit of apple cider vinegar and oil to rub on the pork, tenderloin. But yeah, it all depends. For example, I'm using white wine vinegar in this, and I also used a little bit of white wine vinegar in the deviled eggs. Why? Personally, just through experience, trial and error. I think that's, at the end of the day, what most cooking amounts to is you try something, you either like it or don't like it, and you sort of edit based on that.
Yeah, and I always think of white wine vinegar as the background, but if you wanted something that had a flavor to it, then you would go to maybe a champagne vinegar
Sure,
or
exactly.
red wine vinegar
or even
a balsamic
a step
vinegar.
before that, you might traditionally use white vinegar, just traditional distilled white vinegar. Maybe you'll take it a step up and use the white wine vinegar. So it's all about layers. It's all about just figuring out what works for you. I added a little zest personally. I love onion, so I added a little bit of onion powder just to bring out
You
some
and the
flavor.
onions.
I know, I'm notorious for my love of onions, but I digress.
So you put onion powder in there, so what you
Yeah,
just
just
said?
a little
Okay.
bit, just to sort of help balance the flavors. And we have some mint chiffonade, which is basically you take the mint leaves, roll them up, and cut them into nice thin ribbons. So we'll give that a toss, and that's it.
Awesome.
Again, we're doing simple recipes today. Just give it a quick toss, and we'll go ahead and plate that in a moment.
And I'm thinking that could be cold or warm.
Yes, definitely.
Right?
Yeah.
So-
now I believe it's traditionally served cold. Oh, excuse me. Traditionally served cold. But
Oh,
yes.
it's cold.
I
Okay.
believe so, although
Okay.
I might be mistaken. This is in discussing with my chef friend. We were developing the menu earlier this year. And so it can be served cold, but yeah, definitely also served hot. If it
Yeah.
is served hot, you don't have to worry about, obviously, shocking it in the ice. You might just go right from, in fact, you could also oven bake it and then add on the garnish at the end.
Yeah, I love that idea.
Yep, there's all sorts of options.
So I belong to a CSA. So a CSA is a partnership with a local farm. And I got like tons of green. I never know what I'm going to get, and that's why I like a CSA, is because it gets me doing things that I'm like, what is that? Like,
It gives you variety, exactly.
I got a lemon cucumber. I'm like,
Ooh.
yeah, so it had like.
I've heard of lemon thyme and lemon basil, but never a lemon
Anyways,
cucumber.
I got a bunch of green beans, and I'm like, what am I going to do with all these green beans? So what I did was I roasted them, and they worked out to be like almost like a French fry.
Yes, a lot of
It's a lot,
starchier, a lot of vegetables on the starchier side have that benefit, and if you treat them like a French fry, they will deliver a lot of what you're looking for in a traditional white potato French fry.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's good to know. Oven baked also is no substitution for deep frying, but if you use the heat correctly, it actually can be a pretty decent substitution. Also, there are a lot of at-home air fryers
Yep.
now, which I highly recommend. Essentially, it's using the technology of a convection oven, which most commercial kitchens use, but most home kitchens don't really have. They'll have the incandescent heat just sort of coming around the oven, but it won't be turned around by a fan, which is going to cook things more quickly, more evenly.
Yep.
And so basically an air fryer is a mini oven, a mini convection oven, excuse me. So moving right along, so we have our pork tenderloin here. And this is actually a pork loin that I fabricated into a tenderloin. Tenderloins at the store were all pre-marinated. Basically, there's no problem with that. And if you're looking for, let's say, an Asian pork tenderloin style, you might have just found your meal for the night and you're all set. But be aware, as with most most prepared foods, there's going to be a really high level of salt, as well as perhaps just some ingredients that you may not want in your body. So, as always, I recommend making things yourself as much as possible.
Yep. When you are able to control what's being put on it, it's always a better way to go. I find that So pork tenderloin is loin is lean in and of itself.
Yes, great option.
But so it's easy to digest. But when you buy the prepackaged ones, it can come with preservatives, it can come with high fructose corn syrup, it can come with a lot of other things that you normally would not add.
They're preserving the food, but you might not want to be preserved in that way.
Right.
Yeah, that's definitely, I think, a highlight of our whole series is doing things simply can help you get at the sort of feeling you're after, the comfort, the fullness, the satiety, to use your word.
Satiety.
And so, it just comes down to making something that is enticing, making something that's not too overwhelming, and you have that perfect blend where you're eating something that you created, and it's very satisfying. I mean, it's most of the reason I became a chef is just that sort of coming together of a bunch of different steps. Very satisfying. So we've rubbed the pork down with a little apple cider vinegar, like I mentioned, a little olive oil. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, did we have any questions?
Olive oil. Okay, what makes extra virgin olive oil better oil to use in vegetables, in foods, versus vegetable oils?
Sure, so essentially in terms of quality, extra virgin is going to be the first pressing. So what that means is it's going to have a lot of the flavor notes that you're looking for in an olive oil. However, there are several tiers to olive oil. There's, of course, just sort of traditional olive oil and all the way down to essentially industrial grade olive oil. Obviously, you don't want to be using that if you can help it. There are also a lot of blended oils that you can find which have some olive oil, and the reason they blend primarily is because olive oil has a very low smoke point. And so if you're using it in cooking, it's going to give a lot of nasty flavors to your dish. It's not going to really work well. But that being said, it's great for garnish in a raw dish or a pre-prepared dish, right? So depending on what you're doing, again, like we were speaking about before, you're gonna change out the oil you're using. If you wanted to just get one and not sort of wonder, well, should I get this? And oh, now I can't use this. I would recommend just the traditional olive oil. It won't say extra virgin, it'll just say olive oil. That's gonna be the second pressing, which is mostly as flavorful. It's basically just a little more affordable. There's really nothing wrong with it. In my opinion, I use it more often than extra virgin because it has a slightly higher smoke point and it's not so intense of flavor. So you can blend it with different things. If I were to make a blended oil, I would use just the regular olive oil, and in lieu of that, with the extra virgin, pretty much just for salads or maybe cold vegetables.
I agree. So you don't ever want to see oil at a smoke point. You don't want to see it smoke, because that's actually a carcinogen.
Right. Speaking of carcinogens, exactly.
Yeah. So salad dressings or marinades,
right,
that kind
vinaigrette,
of stuff.
that sort of thing.
But so olive oils are high in omega-3s. So omega-3s, there are two different types of fats, omega-3s and omega-6s. We get a lot of 6s in our diets. We don't get as much omega-3s. So omega-3s are in nuts and seeds and olive oil, avocado oil.
Salmon too, I believe.
Salmon.
Right?
And they are anti-inflammatory. So if you are choosing to use an oil, I don't recommend using just vegetable oil as much, because that tends to be like sunflower oil or safflower oil. The other is canola, which has no flavor to it. So
no flavor at all. Very high smoke point though, so if you are, speaking of, not smoke point, but speaking of cooking over, let's turn this down a little.
And grapeseed is the other one. I think grapeseed has a really high...
Yes, grapeseed, avocado oil, I believe, also has a decently high smoke point. Again, it always just depends on what your purpose is. If you're garnishing with an oil, that's a lot different than if you're cooking with it. The one benefit of the neutralness of something like canola is that you can use it to cook just about anything. So there's always trade-offs, but be aware if you are cooking with olive oil, notwithstanding the smoke point, if you're cooking something not too quickly or at not too hot a level, it's still going to add a lot of olive flavor. And if you're not really keen on olives, just be aware that you might want to use canola instead, or grapeseed oil, that sort of thing.
Grapeseed or avocado. The extra virgins tend to be lighter to me than just the regular.
I feel the opposite.
Do you?
We actually went to an olive oil ranch earlier this year, and we were just tasting the olive oil straight off the spoon, and little crostinis to help wash it down. And man, that was, when you want to talk about quality, that came right off the tree and right into my mouth. So for the rub here, just to detail what I've been putting on the tenderloin. The key two ingredients are going to be rosemary and clove, and so those really complement each other in a unique way. It's kind of hard to describe, but I really recommend trying it out. Also, we have a little ginger in here, a little nutmeg, cinnamon. Anytime you're talking about these warming spices, some people often call them the pumpkin spice blend, or that sort of thing. Anytime you're dealing with those, it's pretty much just a quick set of 6 or 7 spices. Cinnamon, allspice, nutmeg, you have ginger, cardamom, those sorts of things. You're always welcome to use all of them, but I find using them strategically, just a couple of them, helps bring out more sort of usable notes of flavor, right? Kind of think of it like an artist has a palette, and maybe if you'll recall a grade school art class, if you mix all of the colors together, it turns brown, right? Exactly, it turns a really muddy color, not very appetizing or enticing. So same thing with food. Not necessarily less is always better, but you can be a little more strategic and get a lot more flavor out of what you're working with.
Yeah.
So we're gonna go ahead and throw this in. As well, there's a little bit of orange zest in the spice mix. So we're gonna throw that in the oven, 350 to 400. Just keep an eye on it because pork cooks pretty quickly, and it's unlike beef. It doesn't have a lot of forgiveness. So once
it can get rubbery. Yeah,
it can get
and
tough.
It's lean. So
and it's
very
lean. Exactly.
lean.
A lot of beef cuts you'll be going for, steaks, that sort of thing. They are gonna have plenty of fat to help bridge that sort of gap. But
last time we had done the Thanksgiving turkey loaf, could you do this similar with ground pork?
You could, yeah, definitely. This would be a great, even like a sort of a Christmas burger.
Oh,
with the ground pork. Yeah.
I love that idea. So, if you're somebody who's soon after gastrectomy, ground meats are going to be easier than, whole meats. Even if you chew them really well, which we want you to chew your food really well. I always recommend starting with ground things. So that's why we did the Thanksgiving loaf. But I love that idea about a burger. That's all. Yeah.
It's always about twisting things up just a little bit.
Love it.
You might love something. You might love the way it works. Why don't I grind it up? Right.
Yeah,
That's all about what the
yeah.
kitchen is playing around.
Yep.
So we're gonna get this going back here. Let it finish cooking off.
What did you put in there, Zach?
So just a little bit of cinnamon and nutmeg. Cinnamon, nutmeg, heavy cream, salt.
Okay. Are you
Very simple.
Do you get the nutmeg and do it yourself?
So that is another one, if I can find it.
Yeah.
Lately, I've had a lot of struggles at the grocery stores. Perhaps it's just around the Baltimore area, but I think it's more of a national trend where supplies obviously are a little haywire.
Yeah.
So I haven't been able to find any nutmeg recently.
Okay.
I really wanted to for everyone to grate a little
Yeah.
bit. Just it's such a the aromatics, even while you're grating it, is so pleasurable. It really just makes me think of the holiday season. So
Mine was celery seed. I could not find celery seed all summer.
Old Bay probably used all of it.
I finally found it this past Sunday. I was like, oh, there it is.
There you go.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're just gonna have this finishing off. We have our tenderloin in the oven. Spend a few minutes maybe just answering any questions. Do we have anything come up?
It's about the cottage cheese, so I don't know if you want to go there.
Sure, I mean, we're gonna jump on the cottage cheese in a minute, and that'll be our dessert for the day. We could actually set it up now if you wanted to talk about that, and we can jump back to the entree.
So the question is about, I'm not a fan of cottage cheese, but I do like this recipe for a dessert. Are there any other alternatives to the cottage cheese?
Absolutely. So for me, I'm going for that texture of creamy, but also that you have the small curds that give you that almost like a rice-like texture. And in that vein, we were talking about this before the show, is you could do a rice pudding. If you're going to do anything and you have issues with lactose, there are dairy-free options. For the rice pudding, I've found a couple of recipes that use either an oat or an almond milk, so you could also use those as a substitute. The key thing is here is you have sort of a nice blend of textures. You're going to have the snap and crunch, but also the give of the peaches, the bright flavor, again the crunch of the walnuts, and you'll have those essential oils. And then you have this sort of simple bed that you're working with, which has that soft give, kind of like a rice kernel or a small curd of cheese. Yeah, I mean, that would be my recommendation.
So I like that idea because rice is very, very easy to digest. It's the easiest food on the planet to digest. So I like a rice pudding idea. If you can do dairy and you don't like cottage cheese, ricotta cheese?
Sure, you can do ricotta.
I don't know.
To me, even like a mascarpone, although it doesn't have that curd, it could be involved if you wanted to mix a little mascarpone in with the rice, for example. Always just playing around,
Yeah.
but yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so dairy can be difficult for certain people after gastrectomy. Not everybody, but it can cause something called dumping, where because I don't have a pouch anymore, a stomach pouch, they make it a little tiny pouch, but things can fall into the small bowel or dump into the small bowel, and then that can just make you feel really sick. So it can give you blood sugar problems, you can feel really tired, you can get sweaty, feel sick. It can give you belly pain and diarrhea. It can be any of those combinations of things. And the sugar in the dairy is the thing that can cause that problem. Other things are drinking and eating at the same time, because the drinking pushes things through. So drinking and eating is separate. So I'm going to drink between my meals and not with my meals. And also, that way if I'm eating my meal, I'm not filling up on the liquid so much, so I can hold more at a time. But traditionally, after gastrectomy, people are doing like tablespoons, then they get to a quarter of a cup, then they get to a half. So slowly, over time, the body's amazing. It can adapt itself and get more of a pouch. But in the beginning, dumping can be just really difficult to maneuver through.
Definitely.
So I always tell people in the beginning, don't do any dairy, and then test yourself later. And then I have a lot of people who go back to a totally normal diet and can eat everything.
Eventually, sorry to cut you off there,
okay.
Mary. Eventually, it seems that, especially if you listen to your body and you take careful note and work incrementally, you can return to a sense of normalcy. And I think that, in my opinion, these recipes help with that, because just a couple of bites, even, for example, with the deviled eggs, very filling. Right. And so.
And nourishing.
And nourishing, exactly. So we're aiming for that, definitely.
Yeah, I had a patient a couple weeks ago. She's out of gastrectomy, and we're giving her more treatment, and she was just not eating anything because everything made her sick. And I said, well, did you try to do the gastrectomy diet? And she's like, I just have no appetite. Anyway, so I'm like, go back to that diet and let's try that. 2 weeks later, I went back in, and she's like, I'm so much better. I'm so much better. I'm like, yeah, just follow the guide. If you follow what you need to be doing, you're going to feel better.
So back here, just to illustrate what I'm working on a little, or talk it out, we have that sweet potato mash finishing up, and through a little bit of TV magic, I already have that prepared for you. So we have our delicious sweet potato mash here, and that's going to be, like I said, very simple. We cooked those sweet potatoes down in the heavy cream. We have a little salt. You can add some pepper if you like, but it doesn't necessarily add or detract from this recipe per se. Although I will say that salt and pepper are kind of the peas in a pod that make every dish work. In the baking world, they often say that salt and vanilla extract is the equivalent to, say, in the kitchen world,
salt and pepper.
Salt and pepper, exactly. So everyone has their dynamic duo.
So it's just the allspice?
So this one's actually just nutmeg and cinnamon. But actually,
cinnamon.
Allspice would go great in this. It has that natural sweetness that would go well with the sweet potatoes. But again, I might, instead of using cinnamon, nutmeg, and allspice, I might trade one out, just to see, kind of like with your small spoonfuls, see what works, see if you can notice those small changes in the taste profile. So we're just gonna spoon out a little bit more of the sweet potato mash. We've got our green beans, of course. And we also did a little TV magic for our pork tenderloin, so we'll have that out in just a moment. And what I'm doing right now, just to, we were talking about this before the show, Mary Eve. I think a big part of why I present these recipes the way I do is because of the presentation, right? It looks good, it looks tasty, and I think, like we were talking about, that's a big part of getting that nutrition, of getting what you need out of the day, and it not being too intimidating, it not being too overwhelming, that sort of thing.
So, a lot of times if you're struggling with appetite, to make the experience more enjoyable can really help. So I tell people, if they're not having a good appetite, come to the table. I have so many patients that are like in their bed or in a chair, and I'm like, come to the table that signals, oh, it's time to eat.
Right.
And make it colorful and beautiful, but small. So I'm not going to sit with a plate this big. I'm probably going to sit with a, something maybe
something
that big.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's going to look beautiful. And so that's going to be, oh, that looks good because it looks nice. I find that does really, 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 really help.
I know for me personally, it makes a great deal of difference. So.
Okay, that's fascinating. What is that?
So this is actually, and I will say that, of course, and I forgot to at the beginning thank our sponsors. We're hosted here at Gordon Ramsay Steak at the Horseshoe Casino, and all of the plates I've been using this year, I've been borrowing from them. This is their tea diffuser that they serve to their guests, and it's just, everything here is so nifty, I must say.
I'm fascinated by
I know,
that.
eh?
I mean, I have a tea ball, but that like is a whole nother.
It's a whole nother level.
level.
So what we have in there, just to talk about it a little bit, we have, this is sort of a digestive tea. Again, very simple, not too much in there. We have some thyme, we have some lemon, we have some star anise. You might have seen star anise without ever recognizing what it is. Basically, it's a little seed pod, and it has a nice licorice flavor. Mm-hmm. If you don't like licorice, definitely stay away from this one, because it is a very strong flavor, but it adds a natural sweetness, so you might not necessarily need agave nectar or honey because of that combination. There is also a little bit of ginger and cinnamon in there.
I was going to say, so I have a ginger tea that I tell my patients to make, and so it's, you take about an inch root of the ginger, peel it, chop it up, put it in 2 cups of water, and boil it for 15 minutes, and then strain it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And the fresh ginger, of course.
It's fresh ginger.
Like we were talking about.
So ginger is a natural digestive aid that we were talking about. Mm-hmm. But then you can take that, and then you can sip it warm. You could add carbonated seltzer to it to make your own ginger ale. You can put some lemon in it. You can put some honey in it.
Now you're talking my language.
Because ginger ale doesn't have really much ginger in it.
Right.
So if you're looking for an anti-nauseant or a digestive aid, I tell people to do the real ginger. So I love this idea with the real ginger in it. I think that's...
Yeah, definitely. Again, anytime you can go fresh, especially when you're talking about diffusing something, you're getting almost everything out of it.
Right,
so.
right. The other thing is some people are asking about green tea. So green tea has a antioxidant property to it. The problem is if you're buying green tea that are in tea bags, there's not much of that in there. So it's
right.
The ECGC, so there's not much in there. You really have to do the loose leaf itself to get that antioxidant out of it. So I love this idea also to maybe put some loose leaf green tea in there too.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It doesn't have to expressly be the ingredients I mentioned. Again, it can definitely be modular. It could be a supplement to a tea leaf that you're using. And I can't speak to this with certainty, but I believe green tea is going to be a little better than, for example, black tea, a little less strong at the very least.
Yeah, so the thing about tea is, even decaf or regular tea, if you're having heartburn, if you're having problems with reflux, it's going to make it worse.
Okay.
And sometimes people think, oh, I should be doing like peppermint tea as a digestive aid, whereas peppermint is a digestive aid.
Right.
In a tea, it can actually make reflux worse.
Okay.
So no caffeine, no decaf. Both of them have the same, it's the valve between, and sometimes this is removed with the surgery, so it's even more compound. It releases that and makes it weak.
All good to know. You know, there are also, like we were talking about, lemon varietals. There are some different varietals of mint, peppermint, for example,
yeah.
but that you can play around with. Some might work a little better for your stomach.
Yep.
The wintergreen, that sort of thing. So we have our cooked off pork tenderloin. This one did sit in the oven for a little too long. So
what's the temperature, Zach, that you want?
So you're going to start off a little on the higher side, 350 to 400. And you may want to turn it down, though, once you get that initial sort of browning on the outside, again, so that you don't overcook it. But you're really only looking at 15 minutes or so. You're going to want to look for an internal temperature of at least 155. Okay. It doesn't have to be the full 165 like chicken, but definitely you want to make sure it's thoroughly cooked to avoid any sort of issues there. So yeah, this one's definitely a little overcooked. You'll see it has that completely white inside. If there's a little bit of pink, again, not too much of an issue, but for our purposes, this actually isn't such a bad thing because it's fully cooked, and so we're very certain that all the pathogens, all the harmful bacteria are no longer present. So we're gonna slice this to order. And like we were talking about in terms of the portion size, I'm filling this plate, but mainly just so that everyone can see the eye-catching nature of it. If you only end up eating a few slices, it's still going to be pretty filling. You have that nice lean meat, so no issue there. Got that nice little end piece I'll put right there. All right, so we're making our way here. Our tea's still steeping.
How long do you want to steep it for?
As long as you like, really. Okay. There's sort of an upper limit where it'll stop diffusing. So
that's like the ginger. I tell you, to 15, try 15. If it's too much for you, pull it back to 10. If it's not enough, go to 20.
And the most wonderful thing about tea is if it's too strong, you just dilute it. Just add a little more water and it's right as rain. So.
Yep.
Oop. Oh, forgive me. All right. So this gravy also fell apart a little bit. That's one thing. We used a pan gravy today, mainly because of, well, just wanted to make the pork tenderloin glisten a little bit. In terms of getting a store-bought gravy like this, again, I would recommend making it at home. This is mostly for the TV magic, although we might have to even skip this TV magic because as this was sitting, in full disclosure, as this was sitting on the back burner, it got a little done. So we'll skip that, we'll imagine that element. But yeah, just a nice glisten on there. If you wanted to, you can always sear off the pork before you put it in the oven. Then take some veggie stock, cook down all the scrapings, and that's what you'd call a pan sauce. Very simple kind of approach, and it always has the flavors of whatever you're cooking. So you really can't go wrong there.
Okay, peaches, right?
Yes, peaches.
Did you do anything to the peaches?
No,
okay.
Just cut fresh. You could put them in the oven, sprinkle them with a little bit of cinnamon to give them just a nice pop and break down the fiber a little bit. But no, in this case, I've just had them there. I did cook off the walnuts just a little bit, just to give them some toast and to bring out those essential oils. Kind of gives them a nice crunch on the outside as well.
So if you're not able to do fresh fruit, canned fruit can be used, you know, peach cups can be used, or.
And those ones are already cooked thoroughly, so
they're very easy to digest.
So the texture is going to be much better too.
And then you always toast your nuts, right?
I do, yes. I always do because it brings out those essential oils. Pretty much it just makes it taste more like itself, really.
Yeah, it enhances it.
Did we have any questions come up?
I don't have any more.
Okay. Well, we're rounding out towards the end here. We have our entree here. I've done a little bit of a 1, 2, 3 style. There's all sorts of ways that you can play on the plate. The most traditional and familiar to most people would be called the 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 9 o'clock method. And that's where you might have your sides here, and then your entree right in front of you, or excuse me, your meat or sort of your main right in front of you. But play around. You know, for me, I love sort of giving it structure, giving it height. If you have a tenderloin that maybe is a little jagged, you might turn that into the focal point of your dish, right? There's not necessarily any mistakes. A jazz musician that I quite like once said something of, there's no such thing as a wrong note, just a wrong note after another note, right? So in terms of improvising, maybe you made what you thought was an error, but then if you pivot and sort of play around, it might turn into something wonderful.
Better than what you
had in mind in the first place. Exactly. All right, so this tea definitely I would give it much more time to diffuse. It's not going to have too much of a color because we didn't use a green or a black tea as well.
So you could also use cheesecloth. That just came to my mind. Is that you could put them all in a cheesecloth and then put them in a pan and simmer.
Or if you have a small strainer, you can also sit it at the top of the pitcher or cup or what have you and let it steep, and then you can just pick it up, no mess, dump it right in the trash. So
if you don't have the Gordon Ramsay fancy one, we got other options.
You've got other options, right. I know not everyone has this fancy diffuser. I just thought it was so beautiful. Really wanted to share it with y'all. So again, it has a very mild color right now. You're not going to get a lot of pop to that, but the flavors are already definitely there. It's even just sitting, steeping for 5-10 minutes. Yeah. That's going to help you digest all of this. Even on its own, I don't know personally, I would want a little snack with it. So to me, these two, the dessert and the tea, pair really nicely.
Yeah, the only thing with, again, drinking and eating at the same time after surgery is not going to be your friend. Okay. So you're going to...
One or the other. So, so for example, this could be dessert or this could be dessert.
Right.
And they're both going to actually go nicely because we have these spices that we've brought along the way, right? We have all of the warming spices, the cinnamon, nutmeg, that have sort of gone along our menu, and that's something I would also recommend when you're thinking about, if you are thinking about, for example, hosting a party, having people over. These are some great recipes, especially of course the deviled eggs, that'll just entice, make people feel comfortable at home, and don't require too much effort.
It says holiday without screaming holiday.
Yeah, and
the smells are also very holiday.
Exactly,
yeah.
and I know a lot of people take pride in putting a lot of work into a holiday meal, but as we mentioned, some of our patients, those who are watching this video might not have as much energy as they may once had, but they still really want to pull off an amazing holiday meal. So these are some options to get you started. But as I mentioned, all really modular. With the spiced pork, if you wanted to trade out a couple of spices, one I would highly recommend is cumin. Cumin goes great with pork, so like a cumin with the apple cider vinegar. Those two I would keep, but maybe I'd omit the clove, because clove is a very strong flavor, and once you put it in a dish, you kind of can't get away from it. So always playing around, that sort of thing, always just seeing what works for you. And I believe we are rounding out towards the end. I think we have everything in front of us. We have our tea, our dessert, we have our entree, and just a personal note, these green beans, as I mentioned, a chef friend of mine recommended this recipe, and I can't get enough of it. It's one of these things I could snack on. You pop it in the fridge, just grab a couple of bites, and you're like, oh, let me grab one more bite.
Yeah.
So, and of course, the deviled eggs are a great snack anytime of day. I believe that's about the size of it. I did want to thank our sponsors, of course, for today's event. We have the Horseshoe Casino for hosting us. We have the Debbie's Dream Foundation and all of their sponsors for sponsoring the event, of course. And I wanted to thank you, Mary Eve. It's been a great year going over some awesome recipes, and we look forward to seeing you all next year potentially. And if not, have a wonderful holiday. Stay safe. Stay warm if you are in a northern climate, and take good care. Bye now.
Bye.